Welcome to this week's episode of the First Moves podcast. This week we're talking to Christian Bertens, co-founder and CEO of Peyeoneer, a company making treatment for glaucoma. Christian takes us through his PhD research and how this led to a startup that failed during clinical trials and how he went from that to co-found Peyeoneer. He talks about the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and he goes deeper into what Peyeoneer does and what glaucoma actually is. If you want to hear how groundbreaking research becomes a business and what that journey actually takes, then this episode is made for you. Christian, welcome to the First Moves podcast, and thank you for joining us. You have a bachelor's in life science and diagnostics. You did 2 masters, one in biomedical and biomolecular science from Master University and from Toho University in Japan. What got you down the path of studying biology?
Hey, Sebastian. That's a great question. What brought me there? Well, when I went I think it was in my high school, we had a fair in the gym. And during this fair in the gym, there was a small stand, and I did small experiments. So where all the universities presented there were just people with books. There was one with a kind of a geeky professor that did kind of chemical and physical experiments, and that triggered my attention. And I've always had a knack for biology and for physics, for chemistry. It was in the line of interest. So immediately I went to that fair, and afterwards I said, well, Mom, Dad, I want to go to the Fontys University of Applied Sciences. That's what I want to do. And that's basically how I enrolled in that. Without any hesitation. I didn't look for a second university. Was immediately, that's the one. It triggered, I had a very good promotion. And 4 years later, I graduated, so yes.
It's very nice that just that one fair can make that such a good impact that you say, okay, this is really what I want to do. And also that you stick with it afterwards, that it's not just something that you saw there and it's like, I want to do it now, but you're still doing it. And now you have your company and everything with it and your PhD and everything.
Yeah, I'm also still active as an alumnus at the university. So on a regular basis, at least once a year, I go there, talk to the new students and see where the future can bring them.
And inspire them a little bit as well for...
That's the question. It's always tough. But, yeah.
You did your PhD here in Maastricht.
That's correct.
In collaboration with the Maastricht University Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly was your PhD about?
So my PhD was a very large public-private partnership. It's called the Camelot Institute for Science and Technology, or in short, INSITE. And it was a collaboration between the province of Limburg, DSM, Maastricht University Medical Center, and Eindhoven University of Technology, and of course Maastricht University. And the question there was to develop a drug delivery system to replace eyedrops. So what they did there was they had these academic theses that were lying around with fundamental research, and they needed to translate this to a clinical perspective. So really bridging the gap from academia to clinical use. And that triggered my attention. I was like, okay, this is something I'd like to do, bridging that gap.
And exactly how do you go about this kind of bridging that gap then? Because it's quite a big thing, right? Replacing eye drops with a medical way of doing it. How do you start that process?
So there was a foundation. So it was not that they say, okay, we need an addition or a replacement of eye drops. So they had some research lying around, and this research looked at a kind of a rod, a hair-shaped rod, the thickness of a hair, that has been coated with several drugs. And they say, okay, we can place that in the lower eyelid of the eye, and if we can keep it there for an X number of weeks, then we basically can replace eye drop therapy. And if you can do it in a slow releasing mechanism, you don't need the full amount of drugs that you normally insert with eye drops because you spill a lot.
Yes.
But we can also lower the dose, so you can microdose because you continuously give a little bit of drugs to the eye. So having this lying around, this concept lying there, it was for us, okay, how do we want to tackle this? So what's the approach? Do you want to have one drug in its eluting stent, or do you want to combine it? So then you start a kind of a brainstorm process. So what are the user needs to get there? So together with physicians, and I think that was the real power of what Camelot Insight did, they brought the clinicians who on a daily basis saw the patients and understood the needs, together with very smart scientists that already had a clue, a foundation lying around, but never got into this clinical setting. So bringing those together, we got the idea of making a drug-eluting stent in a kind of a shape of a coil, a coiled spring, basically, which you also use for cardiac shunting. So not the whole shunt. We only took about a centimeter of that. And then we filled it with microspheres, very small balls of a specific size. And then you could decide, okay, we want now an anti-inflammatory drug, or we want an antibiotic. So we coat microspheres with a separate drug, and then put that in this drug-eluting stent. And that was placed under the eyelid to serve as a treatment to remove the eye drops.
And would the idea then be that, let's say I needed the eye drops and I would get this, I could place that myself and then leave it for a while, or would you have to get this medically placed?
So the idea was that if you look in the ophthalmic field, everybody at a certain age gets, how is it called? Cataract, sorry.
Yes.
So at a certain age, everybody gets cataract. And the idea was that normally after cataract surgery, you have about a month in a declining schedule that you have eye drops. So after the surgery, the physician or the surgeon would gently pop down your eyelid, you're already sedate, slide in the ocular coil or the drug-eluting shunt, and then tape on it, you go home, and then you leave it there. And if you have a checkup or a phone call, they say, okay, how are you feeling? The anti-inflammatory does its work. And then after a month, they give you a call. Okay, pop down your eyelid, and it drops out.
Okay.
That was the initial idea.
Okay. And you say that now that was the initial idea.
Yeah.
What ended up being the final idea then?
Well, that was the idea. However, in the clinical study, we observed that people lose it. So the first weeks in the clinical study, so we did 2 clinical studies. So the first clinical study, we placed it, and then we told the patients, like, okay, or the participants, you have this in your eye, be gentle with it. And the first week it was okay. They were aware. They came on checkups. We checked them every other day, and they were aware that it was there. And then when we extended the time between the checkups, we saw the increase of people losing it, because they were not that aware anymore, and then rubbing their eyes, taking a shower, not being gentle anymore. You rub it out, and then your end of clinical study.
And would people notice when they lost it?
No. No, it was, we coated it, and I've worn it myself as well for quite some time. And even I also lost it. Because you have the feeling, if you normally cycle somewhere, you get a fly in your eye or a little bit of dust, or it's sharp, it irritates, you start blinking, but this was coated in a smooth way, so you didn't feel it. And with placement, you feel it, because with a tweezer it's brought in the forceps or fornix, and 5 minutes after, you didn't know that you had it anymore.
So then you rub your eye once, or you just a little bit tired or something, you wake up, and then it can fall out.
Yeah, most people lost it during while dressing, so putting something on your head, and in the shower. That was at least
the flushing of water coming in, potentially. Yeah,
washing your face. They washed it out.
So the clinical trials didn't work then in the beginning. Is it then something that the project was kind of abandoned, or someone else took it over to try to design a different way for it?
The initial idea was we had a straight rod. Just a straight rod, and because it was a coil, it would curve with the bending of the eye. Yes. So then we did a pivot, and that's the fun thing. If you have a properly addressed quality management system, if you do a pivot, you can, within 2 months, we had a curved version along the circumference of the eye, and then we placed that in, but we saw the same conclusion.
Same happen.
Then we had some ideas, okay, readjust the coating, but readjusting the coating with something that has not medically been improved, and that's getting a different field. And you first need permission to use those chemicals. You make of a 4-year project another 4 to 8 year project.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems was as well that the patent that describes the coil as we designed it was by that time already a couple of years old, because it came from the previous PhD. So eventually we decided, okay, let's abandon that and not continue with it.
Yeah, because then at some point you start putting too many resources into something that already shows that it might not work.
Yeah.
How did that feel for you that didn't work? Was it like a personal like pain point?
The first clinical study, when we saw so much people dropping out in the study, I was like, shit, this is not going well. And you have an X number of patients or participants in this study, so you see them dropping out. It's like, okay, but this should work. So you really, I had this feeling, I wanted to keep that feeling, like it should work, because I spent 4 years of my life on this. And yeah, eventually you analyze the results, and they kind of bitch slapping you in the face, to say it that way.
Yeah.
It's like it. And then we sit together, also the professors, and they say, okay, let's curve it along the circumference. That gives you this little bit of energy that says like, okay, this could really work.
Yeah, a little bit of hope.
Yes, you get this little bit of hope, and you start again, and then the results were a bit better. Still not optimum. So, and eventually you realize as well, looking to the resources you spend, the time you spend, that it's not worthwhile spending another couple of thousands of euros into this, or hundreds of thousands, I should say, to make it work.
Yeah, medical innovation is super expensive and it's very lengthy. So as you say, then you turn from a 4-year project, you turn it into another 4 or 8 year project, and by the time you're done, the patent is already at its 20-year mark almost. So there's not much there anymore.
Indeed.
Yeah. How did this then shape your route to founding Peyeoneer, where you work with glaucoma?
So after this first project within Insight, I found my thesis or for a PhD, and then one of the other professors in the ophthalmic field, Henny Beckers, she came to me and said, well, I've got another idea I really want to bring to the patient, and we think you're the guy that can help us with this. So, and yeah, unfortunately, I didn't bring prototypes. I've got them on my desk, so apologies for that. But
no worries.
She came with a device which was already on the market since the 60s of last century. So it's a very old device, and it's still being used today. It's still the gold standard. And she said, I see so many complications. And if you look in literature, more than 50% fails in the first 5 years. And people that have glaucoma, they will eventually go blind. And what we want to do is prolong that period as long as possible, keep them in society. And that triggered me. So I said, like, okay, let's do this. I've done this trajectory on a drug-eluting platform. Let's see whether we can also do this on a non-drug eluting platform, but in a invasive implant.
Yeah.
So that's how I basically started the research towards what formed the foundation of Peyeoneer. And then in 2020, my contract ended. We were running out of finance. I've got some discussions with the valorization officers of the university, and they say, well, maybe it's time to transfer this out of the university. The university cannot bring a medical product to the market. They don't have the resources. They don't have the help that we need. And that was basically the idea, the initial steps forming Peyeoneer as it is at the moment.
So it was a university kind of like spin-off startup.
The research has been conducted within the framework of the Camelot Institute for Science and Technology. Yeah. So basically, I always said, well, we are a startup out of Insight.
Yeah, okay. So is that part of the Brightlands campuses then as well?
It was, yes. And it's now eventually Insight, the funding run out. And the founders of Insight, they developed MedAce. So
yes, okay. Yeah. Kurt Giele and...
Danielle Keurs, yes, indeed.
Yes, we had Kurt Giele on the podcast as well. Yeah.
He told me.
Yeah. for someone like me, I don't know much about medical stuff. I know something, but what exactly is glaucoma?
Glaucoma, and yeah, that's the reason I brought this eye. And I think it's best to explain it in a simple way. So glaucoma is a disease by which the pressure in the eye increases.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it's still unknown how this pressure in the eye increases, but everything in your body is related to your blood pressure. So if your heart beats, you get a pulse, and this also is visible in basically the eye.
Yes.
If you look here at the iris, so the iris of the eye, behind the iris, there's a fluid coming into the eye, and this fluid keeps the eye on tension.
Mm-hmm.
Then underneath the cornea, you have basically some drainage holes, so surrounding the whole circumference of your cornea. And the fluid that's produced under the iris fills the front part of the eye, keeps the eye on pressure, and is then cleared in the edges of the cornea and transported by the blood vessels in the eye. Something is wrong with the production or the clearance of this fluid in the eye. So you got an overproduction, or you don't remove as much fluid. And this increases the pressure, and the weakest part of the eye is the nerve. So you see a lot of tension coming around this nerve, damaging the cells there.
Okay.
So you can imagine it's kind of a balloon, that if you blow up a balloon as much, eventually the pressure needs to go anywhere before it basically bursts.
Yeah.
And the weak link is the nerve head.
Yeah.
And there you see the cells dying, and that takes away your vision. And unfortunately, there is not a way to restore this.
Okay. Is this a painful thing when you have this? Is this how you notice it, that you have it?
No. People are most patients are too late when they find it out.
Okay.
And I think in the Netherlands we're kind of lucky, or in Western society, because at a certain age, and I'm almost reaching it, you have problems reading the letters on your screen, and you go to a optician and you ask for some glasses. And what they do there is they also measure the pressure in your eye with a small puff of air.
Yeah.
And that's in the Netherlands, it's a very good system. So that we screen a lot of people with that. And if they say, okay, you're a bit high, just go to an ophthalmologist, have a look. Could be nothing.
Could be something.
Could be something.
Yeah. And what exactly do you then do at Peyeoneer to try to prolong the vision of the patients?
So what we know is we don't know how the disease occurs. So that's still a big question mark, and science is working on that for quite some years. But what we know is if we lower the pressure to something which is more acceptable for that patient, then we can extend the loss of, prevent basically loss of vision.
Yeah.
So what we made was simply said, an overpressure valve for the eye. So we make a small hole in the eye towards the front of the eye, and then we drain the fluid from the front of the eye on top of the eye, away from the eye itself, so it can stay in a more or less healthy pressure, not damaging the cells.
So pretty much then, so let's say on a percentage basis, it's maybe like from 0 to 100, you already have around like 12% damage in your eye because it hasn't been caught early on. Mm-hmm. And then you would use your solution, then kind of it would be staying around the 12% afterwards because you drain away the pressure that doesn't kill the...
that's the whole idea indeed.
Yeah. Can you walk us a bit through the development process of this? How did you reach that this would be the easiest way to do this?
How would we... If I go back to how Henny came to me, and she said, well, there's devices on the market. So since the 60s of last century, they have devices, and they know that taking away this high pressure out of the eye is functional. And that can be done by a surgical procedure called trabeculectomy. And if I always explain it in layman's term, it's just poking a hole in the eye,
okay,
and then cover it with your own eye tissue. So you make a hole, and then with a different kind of tissue, you make a kind of a blister.
Okay.
But you can imagine if you make a hole in something, your body wants to regenerate it,
yes,
so it will close. So there is quite some follow-up on this procedure. It's very effective, really effective. But there is a lot of follow-up, and patients, they have to go to the hospital often. So if that grows together and regenerates that tissue, you have a scar, and you cannot make a second hole because your scar will continue. So then what the idea was, we'll put a piece of plastic in between. So open the eye once more, and then take a tube, a piece of plastic. And the guy that first did this, they had just standard tubes from other machinery of the hospital and the scientific. So that's why the sizes have never been adapted, because it was quite a large tube from an HPLC column that has been placed in the eye with a piece of plastic silicone. And that was basically the first glaucoma implant. And they tried it with horse hairs and all different kind of things, but it was functional. But Henny came to me, we still see a lot of problems with this. So then what we did with Eindhoven University of Technology, we started calculating what is really needed to drain the amount of fluid. Why would you take a sewer tube when you can remove the fluid with a straw or a garden hose? So we reinvented basically the device that was already on the market. We made it smaller. And then we had a problem. So you always see they have a kind of a polymer plate that's positioned on the eye, and that plate prevents growing together, the eye tissues from merging together. But there have been lots of patents on these plates. So we had the idea, okay, make a kind of a donut, a hollow structure, a ring-like structure that will fit anywhere on the eye, because it's a ball. And that was a gap in the patent. So that's why we came to the design that we have now as Peyeoneer. We calculated it, and we looked for a gap in the patents, and that was it. And then we did the first experiments, first in the lab and eventually also in animals. And within the animals, we saw that the regenerated tissue around the area in which we have this implant was, if I describe it to something you have in your own house, it's more like a sponge. So the tissue was really fluffy. There were aqueous pockets in there, and what we already saw after 3 months was that the blood vessels were growing in there. Okay. And that was for me the real trigger, like, okay, we've got something. This has not been observed in literature. We could not find anything in literature that showed that if you have a hollow structure, that the aqueous in there creates a kind of a sponge-like tissue to really drain fluids. Yeah. And when we saw that, I had the idea, okay, this needs to go to the patient.
Yeah. And when you test this, you said on animals first. Yeah. Do you then have to test it on an animal that has a similar eye size to a human? Because I can imagine if you would go... my girlfriend does brain studies, so they work with rats. So she doesn't, but a lot of brain that you work with rats and stuff. But they have very tiny proportions to humans. So then you would have to make it even smaller for it to fit.
Yeah, so what we did within the ophthalmic field, mostly they used rabbits. And rabbits have relatively large eyes. It's only 2 to 3 millimeters difference with a human eye in size.
Okay.
But that's why they look so cute.
Yeah,
if you look at Japanese animes, they have like big eyes. Yeah. And that's also with a rabbit. So they have relatively large eyes with a relatively large cornea. So the implant that we designed for humans would also fit in a rabbit.
Okay, that makes it a lot easier than to go test, because I was already in my head thinking you have to go to a pig or you have to go to a goat or sheep. No, okay. And how has this switch been for you for working from for university, doing research at a university, to then becoming a co-founder and a CEO for a company and doing this through that?
You're a bit thrown in the deep. You always have this feeling like, okay, if you have a startup, they know how to do this, but every startup is different. So when starting, the first thing you realize, everything is freaking expensive. Yeah. We needed a lab space, and we needed people to hire. And what's the first thing you do? You need money, and you can knock on every door, and nobody is giving you money because they need to see where do you want to head to in the coming 5 years. So I started as let's say a biologist, and then from a biologist I had to write a business case. I know how to write grants, but writing a business case and taking a forecast in where you want to go with your company, that was different. That was difficult. And I think the first half year I spent writing grants specifically designed for early phase startups
Yeah.
to get some money in to make it work.
And I think that's also what I've heard from other researchers. That's the biggest switch in it, because when you work for university, you have the somewhat certainty that you are funded for parts of it. You still have to write the applications and stuff, but there's a little more certainty behind it. In the own company, it's like if you don't get any of the funding in, yeah, that's it.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
And end of story.
End of story. Yeah. And how was that for you? So you said you spent the first 6 months looking for the funding. Was that also kind of what you expected that you had to do when you started it, or did you get like frustrated that I kind of want to do something in the lab now and I'm just stuck here in the office writing papers?
Yeah. I've seen it during my PhD with people that founded by that time Eigel. So I knew that it came my way, but you don't realize how deep a shit you're in unless you experience it yourself.
Yeah.
So yes, I had this annoying itch that I wanted to scratch to really develop and really take the implant to the next phase. But that takes time, and then you submit your grant. It takes another half a year for the committee to judge, and then you have to go on a interview. They ask you questions, and then you try to answer them honestly, and eventually you can go home and wait another 2 to 3 months before the judgment comes in and whether you have something or not.
Yeah.
And these procedures are all very, very long and elaborative.
Yeah, then if you don't get it after the 9 to 12 months it takes, then you're back to square one again.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
But luckily, that was not the case.
Oh, that's good. Very good. So you've also received this OP site subsidy to help advance this technology. What impact has this had on your work?
So the largest subsidy we obtained was over $2 million or 2 million euros from, and then I have to say this correctly, from the province of Limburg, supported by the European Union in this OP site project, a site project. And it's a collaboration between MEDES, the Maastricht University Medical Center, and Peyeoneer. And with this subsidy, we can make it possible to implement a digital quality management system, an EQMS, into the company. So working completely paperless, does it mean? Doing the preclinical research for the animals and also setting up everything for the clinical trial. So this was for me a big stepping stone for the company.
Yeah, there's a big subsidy as well to get in. That's great.
And it to be honest, it started as a kind of a joke with the guy that's now working with us as well. He wrote subsidies, and he said to me like, okay, I'm going to write for another company a subsidy. It's like, I'm also going to write this subsidy. So both of us filed a subsidy in the same round, and the nice thing is both of the companies received it. So he also got it. But it actually started as a kind of an inside joke to see who is still the master in, whether he's still my student. And but yeah, now we're colleagues, and he's working next to me, so that's good.
How did you also handle the team building of it? Because you're a very science-based company, and you need highly technical people that absolutely know what they're talking about and what they're doing. So how did you go about building the team for Peyeoneer?
Yeah, so my first goal or my first mission was to get money. I cannot hire someone without money, and that I don't get paid, that was the risk I took. But for the team, I want to have security for them. Yeah. So in the university, I had a PhD, and he eventually went to a company to do his work, and I contacted him. Said like, okay, I'm going for a startup company. Is this something for you on the side? And the same with the engineer that helped me with the design of the first implant. Mm-hmm. I also called her. I said, well, I know you have a different job, but isn't there a kind of an itch that you cannot reach in developing and doing something for? And both of them immediately said yes. There was no hesitation. It was immediately yes, we want to join you. And that's basically the foundation of how we could start. And with those people, we made a roadmap. They know from a technical point of view, a scientific point of view, they've all been in this insight program. So we all had the same backbone, how you set up a quality management system. What do you need to bring this idea to a clinical construction? That's how you start. And then the gaps that we had was in quality and regulatory. So we know a little bit of this, but not the deep dive that you need. And that's where I was very happy that I know Kurt and Danielle.
Yeah.
And that we could write some large subsidy projects in which they could facilitate us with this knowledge. And they could also build their own quality management system and make it larger. So that's how you start. You look in your network, who can help me? And if you don't have the money to do it, look whether you can find the partners that have the money and have the resources and see whether you can get a partnership with them.
Yeah, exactly. And then also having the early on people who come on board, like what you said, you contact them and said, yes, I want to do this. I'm with you on this. You get these people who are also willing to take a bit of a pay cut in the beginning to build something that is great in the end.
I didn't offer them a pay cut.
Okay.
We started negotiations with a salary based on the university standards of salaries, and I said, okay, this is what I will offer you, because I think if you're motivated enough, you will do more for the work.
Okay.
And that's what I see now. So every evening, they also have different jobs. So if they don't work for Peyeoneer, in the evenings I still get texts like, okay, got this genius idea, let's do it this way. Because for them, it feels like more than work. It feels like being part of the development. And they've also seen the patients. Mm-hmm. They also spoke with the patients and they know the impact it has. And that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we're still expanding the team. And I didn't put out a vacancy. People know how to find Peyeoneer. And that's nice.
That's when you have a sweet spot. That's when people know that you're doing this and you're doing it in a good way and they want to be part of the journey. Yeah. That's the sweet spot you're in then.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
And of course, it should be a fit with the team. So it's not up to... Of course, I decide which direction we go. But I cannot do this alone.
No.
So I'm really relying on the team, on the people surrounding me, that I make the right decision. And by the end of the day, I'm the one that says, let's do it or not.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's very important to listen. And also, if somebody comes on an interview, first impression is 80% of it. And then I sit them with the team, with the people, and say, what do you feel? And this feeling is, do you think he can be happy here or she can be happy here? It's like, sometimes it's immediately, yes, this is somebody we can have a beer with and we can have the real good discussions. I've also had times that they say, nice person, but we don't think it's going to work out. We think, and
I really like that approach to having the whole team involved in it as well, to see like, would this be someone that fits you guys as well?
But now it's a small team.
Yeah.
So I can do this.
Yeah.
But if you have 25, 30 people, you cannot please everybody.
No.
And for me at the moment, the budgets are still a bit shy. So I need to know, to have trust in the people I involve. And yeah, at the end of the day, the paychecks are on a monthly basis the largest part of money that goes out of the company.
Yeah. And what is your plan how to commercialize this in the end?
Yeah, so now the goal is, and it's always tricky to say this in a online podcast. So maybe in a couple of years I have to scratch my back and say, like, shit, didn't go as thought. But next year we are in patients.
Okay.
And that's a hard statement. I need to go in patients next year.
Yeah. Clinical study?
Clinical study, yes.
Clinical study.
And my goal is to perform the clinical study in Maastricht. That's where it all started. And I think that's the place it should all start again for the commercialization. I think it's really putting Maastricht on the international map if we can do this well and properly.
And then it would be such a way that hospitals would buy or healthcare insurances would buy it from you, and then a surgeon would put it in, or would you have to educate the surgeons on how to implement this, or is it even a surgeon that needs to do it?
Well, what we would like to start with is the first in human, and with that you make a very strict protocol on how to implant it. And our aim is to make this implant idiot-proof, but it's still a surgery, so there are still risks attached to this. So the surgical procedure needs to be as easy as possible, that even a, let's say, junior surgeon is willing to implant it.
Yeah.
Because all the old surgeons that are close to the pension, I'm quite sure they can do this.
Yeah.
But what I want is the younger generation of surgeons, I want to get them enthusiastic for this surgery, because now these surgeries are sometimes so complex that they cannot do it. They need more training. They shy away from implanting glaucoma implants because it's such a difficult surgery. If you can get them involved, you see probably a shift in the earlier stages of people with the disease that you can also help. But going back to your question, so the idea is to first roll it out in Maastricht. So the first year, first 2 years will be only on study base. We will not sell anything. My idea is to do in parallel an FDA trajectory to go for a 510K application, because there are already products on the market.
Yeah.
Convince them that what we have is more or less similar, and then expand the study towards the US. We have some key opinion leaders that already knocked on our doors and said, well, we really want to try this based on the research data we've seen from you. If we have a 510K application, the insurance in the US will pay for the implant.
Yeah.
Making a study way cheaper than going there and having to buy them off.
Yeah.
And from that, then we will look for somebody who can really help us by selling the implants. My goal is to produce them in Maastricht, but I cannot sell them. I think as a startup, focus on where you're good at.
And try to license it or something.
Maybe in the future, go for an exit strategy, have some large company that is interested. But my goal is, my aim is to keep the production in Maastricht. Build a production facility if we are larger, to really say, okay, in this area we founded this, we started this, and we also have some new ideas for future implants. So there's a portfolio on the way. I don't want to be a one-trick pony.
No, that's a good thing as well, to expand it a little bit. Now, you say the US. Obviously, the US it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, healthcare market to get onto with these kind of things. Is there also kind of like a geographical area you see where people have glaucoma more than other areas in the world?
Yeah, but to be honest, I have to refrain you for answering, because I don't know which area that is.
Because I'm wondering whether it's like, because it's the pressure in the eye. So whether you're up in the mountains, if you live in the mountains, or if you live by the sea, if there's a difference in pressure from outside, if that also affects the pressure on the eye.
Theoretically, you're completely right, but as said before, I cannot answer this because I don't know. It's a very good question, and at home I will look into this, because that's still the scientific guy in me that's never thought on this, on that, in that kind of way.
Yeah, because when you look at for my company Unshackled, we work with Raynaud's, and if you look at just the geographical area in the southern hemisphere, there's a lot less people that have it than in the northern hemisphere, because you get triggered by cold. Yeah. So when you live in a country where it's mainly 20 degrees minimum and then 30 degrees, 40 degrees maximum, you don't really get it that much. Oh. So I was just thinking maybe it could be the same with the glaucoma. Although it might be a bit more actual fully global, because it's still the eye pressure that does it.
What has been observed is that the overall damaging products like smoking, alcohol consumption, bad lifestyle, and eating unhealthy play quite a critical role in developing those kind of diseases. And also glaucoma is on the list, that if you smoke a lot, if you don't have your vitamins, you're prone of developing, together with some genetic factors. So it could indeed be that several or certain diets help in this, but that's still it's more in the preventive area of the disease. And though I think that's very important, it's not helping the people that are at the verge of going blind, and that's where I'm heading towards.
Yeah, and it could look like when you then talk about smoking and eating that it's a blood pressure related thing. Yeah, because it's very interesting that there's quite a bit of people who have this.
Yeah, 3 to 5% of the population above 50.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
and it's crazy to think that many people have it, but the origin of it is still complex, and you don't really know exactly what's happening yet. And yeah, I mean the human body is super complex. Also with the brain, we only know like a small part of what the brain actually does. But it's interesting to see that people like there's a lot of money put into research in this as well. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that there's not really a clear definition of this is the underlying issue. And do you think there will actually ever come a clear definition of this, or do you think it's going to be one of these things that is just so difficult to identify?
It's a multifactorial disease, and the problem is with lots of research, we will conduct this on cells or in animals. However, asking a animal how it feels or it behaves, you don't get a clear reply. What you do is then you look at this behavior.
Yeah.
And it's not always how we interpret it is. So if you really want to have a clear understanding of this disease, you should use human samples.
Yeah.
But taking out an eye, it's serious. You cannot do that. So that makes investigating this kind of disease is very, very difficult. And in the cell, culturing retinal ganglion cells and certain layers of the eye into organoids, that's where we're at the moment. So we can culture part of the eye. We can also regenerate corneas. And we see that steps have been made. So maybe in a couple of years, if we keep this progression up, we can grow a eye in a petri dish connected to a kind of a computer that simulates how the cells see and then mimic the disease.
Yeah.
But for now, I think it's a large challenge, and millions and millions of euros or dollars need to be spent to get a clear answer on this.
Definitely. Because it's funny you say organoid, because I was just about to ask that afterwards as well, because I was thinking maybe it would be possible to make an organoid in a you call it petri dish?
Yeah, petri dish, yes.
Yeah, a dish.
A culture flask.
Any of these words. And then you can do studies on that. But I think one of the big issues at the moment is also that you can't do vascularization in the actual organoid, so you can't grow them into a proper full eye yet, or full or organ, or whatever you wanna do. But do you see the future being that this is going to be the way to research these kind of things? It's like the organoid development?
Partially. So I think that the studies on both humans and animals will still be needed in the future. And it's people don't like me if I say that we still need animals to do these kind of things. And I fully understand that we should not use animals as just pick them and do this for the fun. No, you really should have a clear goal. What do you need it for? Why do you need it for? And some aspects as safety, biological safety, the effect on what does it do with the tissue, we cannot implant this in we can, but ethically we decided as a society that's not preferred or beneficial to implant it in humans. So therefore, the only way to really look whether it's safe to implant these kind of devices is to take animals.
Yeah.
And I think in the Netherlands we're running quite ahead of this. We calculate up front what's needed to see an effect size, and the animals are treated very, very well. But still, it's a pity for the animal.
Yeah. Yeah, but then on the flip side, it's something for us humans. The eyes are so crucial for our well-being and the way we kind of experience our life as well. So it's just very important that it's tested properly, that nothing happens. But it is again with the animal testing, it's this big discussion at the moment of should it be done, shouldn't it be done? Yeah, and that I think that discussion will continue for pretty much forever.
And I think also for people that don't have the disease, it's very hard to understand the impact. And
Yeah.
if you like, I've got a video of one of our patients. It's a Dutch video, but it has English subtitles. So if you like, I can show you this video on the effect of the disease on this patient. What kind of effect this has. So.
We have still a large unmet need to treat glaucoma better than we do now.
Een aantal jaren van intensieve behandeling met druppels en uiteindelijk een chirurgische ingreep aan mijn linkeroog ben ik desondanks blind geworden aan dat oog. Mijn rechteroog heeft dezelfde behandeling inmiddels ondergaan. En mijn grootste angst op dit moment is, word ik aan dat andere oog ook op termijn blind? Ja, die gedachte, dat houdt je 24 uur per dag bezig. En met name ook 's nachts. 's Nachts in de vorm van paniekaanvallen. Van gauw even het licht aan doen en kijken of je nog zicht hebt in dat oog. Een nieuwe behandeling zal voor mij in ieder geval kunnen betekenen dat er een enorme onrust die nou in me zit weggenomen kan worden. En dat ik in ieder geval voor mijn gevoel zekerheid heb dat ik mijn zicht nog vele jaren mag behouden.
Yeah, and I think this is where it gets really real. It's the panic attacks at night, turning on the light. Can I still see?
Yeah.
Because my grandmother, she got skin cancer, but on the back of her eye. So she's been treated many times for that. So she has now, I think it's like a 5% visibility in one eye, and the other eye has also like 5 or 6%. So she's almost blind. She can see shadows and stuff. And I think it's super difficult when you come from having seen your whole life to then at the age of 50 or 60, my grandma's 80, but at that age to start losing your sight, because your whole life you've seen everything.
Yeah.
If you're born blind, it's a different situation, but I think really losing it along, it's difficult.
Yeah, when I went into this glaucoma field, there were papers that said that despite treatment and the best care that we could provide, 25% of people with glaucoma eventually will end up blind on one eye, and 10% will be fully blind by the end of their life. So just imagine that you're lying on your deathbed, and you cannot see who's around you anymore. That's looking at your loved one, but not seeing who that is. So that's the impact is serious.
Yeah.
And that's also when we meet these patients and spoke with them, then that's the moment that you realize, okay, I'm lucky I don't have the disease myself, but now I can feel the people that have the disease.
You see now with getting blind on one eye, that's the percentage that 25% still get blind on one eye. When you have this, do you have it automatically on both eyes, or can you also have it just on one eye and not the other one?
Often it's, if you have it in one eye, you also see this back in the second eye.
Okay. In the whole research that you have done with everything, what has been the most meaningful moment so far with Peyeoneer?
It's a roller coaster. And you sent me these questions, and yesterday evening I went through them, and I was also thinking, so which moments gave me the real drive of impact and feeling that we did something, and thinking and aligning on the business strategy and pivoting. That's something that's giving me energy, knowing that if one way ends or you see an end, that there is another route. But for me, the moment that was really this eureka moment was when we could make the prototypes of the implant in a laboratory. But making one prototype isn't the same as making a series production. So basically you start all over again with your series production. And we are now at the stage that the inner structure can be produced on a larger scale. And that was for me one of the parts that I said, yes, there is progress. We still have this progression. The engineers still have in their fingers what they did a couple of years ago. And if I now look at the people working for me at home, they all have this garage filled with stuff to make things, and most of the stuff is done at home in the evenings after a shower. People think we can tackle this way.
Yeah.
I also made some prototypes out of sugar at home in my kitchen, and my wife was like, why the hell do we need 6 or 10 kilos of sugar? It's like, yeah, got this idea. I need to know how to make this. So I made molds. We 3D printed them, made them out of silicon to see how this would react. And of course, at home, I cannot use polymers and chemicals. So the easiest way to do that was in an oven with sugar to liquid cast the shapes to see how will it come out. Are there sharp edges? And I've got a little one, so she eat all the sugar parts, so that was fun for her as well. But yeah.
So you take the sugar and put them in the molds and kind of just melt the sugar into the shape?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just for prototypes. These molds will not end up in the production lines.
No.
But to really get a feeling on, are we there yet with the shapes, with the products? So I think we have 20, 30 different kind of shapes with very, very minor changes. You're talking about micrometer changes. But just to see whether you can fill those shapes properly, how it's flowing.
Yeah, that's really funny because that's really that entrepreneurial mindset, but also the research mindset of like, now I have an idea, let's try to do it. But it really translates into both of them as well. Also in your kitchen with 10 kilograms of sugar, just trying to make shapes. That's really going to get it, yeah. If someone is listening to the podcast right now that is thinking, am I at risk for the glaucoma? How can you try to identify yourself if you're at risk? Or what should you do if you think you are at risk?
First of all, let me state I'm not a physician or a clinician. So the advice you will get from me is not the advice you will get from any clinical doctor. What I think is, are you at risk? Though everybody is at risk. But if you don't have any problems, if, for example, you're cycling and you notice for the 6th or the 10th time you haven't seen that car coming out of the street right from you or the kids playing around you, you don't see them. Although you have the feeling you're really looking well, you missed them a couple of times. That's the moment you should go to a clinician and ask, well, can you look at me? Because it's like the 3rd or the 4th time I nearly had an accident and I'm sure I looked, but I missed them. Because the brain, and we touched upon here, the brain research, the brain fills in the gaps. So you don't feel that you have a higher pressure in your eye. And the brain is compensating for the gaps. It's we all have this black spot in our eyes where the nerve head is coming in towards the brain. We don't see a black hole in front of our eyes, so that's covered by the brain. Yeah. And that's also what's happening with the early stages of glaucoma. You don't see that you're missing something of your peripheral field. Yeah.
So it starts with that, with the peripheral field usually.
Often it starts like that because the pressure always goes from the outside towards the inner part. So yeah.
When we look back at the research you've done at the university, the research you done for your PhD, and then going into Peyeoneer, what is one advice that you would give people who are right now studying at the university or working on a project that they would like to go into a startup with later on?
I never wanted to go into a startup from my research. So the research showed me that I want to bring this to patients, and the only way to get it to the patients was going for a startup. So if you're already in university and say, I want to do a startup, go to a business school and via that way go into a startup or found something. But for me, that was not the case. So I cannot give advice on how to do this. The only thing I'd like to give away is that trust yourself and listen to your own gut feeling. If you trust the things you did to make in my case, the implant, and the data is okay, ask an expert, somebody who's not biased by what is done, whether they see the same things. if they see the same things as you and confirm that what you observe is good, you got a foundation to think, okay, we can bring this to the patients.
Yeah.
If you do it only with your tunnel vision and you spend a couple of years in there, money in there, and somebody else says, but it doesn't work, it cannot work, the fundamentals are not correct, you waste a lot of researchers and a lot of resources and a lot of time.
And so keep an open mind before going into this. We'll ask some advice from people. Does it work? Does it not work? You won't always know whether it works or not in the beginning, right? But I think that's a very good advice as well to give. It's just, I always call them the horse flaps on the eyes. Like, try to get those away. Because it's very easy to get so excited and so focused on what you have in front of you that you don't see what's up for grabs that's like right next to it maybe.
Yeah. And starting a business, it comes along, at least if you want to hire people and we're in a specific field, so it comes along with a shitload of documentation.
Yes.
All the paperwork you need to set up your company, that's minor. But then if you want to hire people...
Yeah, that's a lot.
I was not prepared for that, I can tell you that.
Yeah. It takes you by surprise. It really does. All the tax documents you need to file in, all the registrations you need to do that you now have employees, all the insurances, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I thought I'm smart, so I got somebody to take care of that. Yeah. And still, all the documents came via me. And the first time, you read it all.
Yes.
The second time, you think, okay, you scan it. Yeah. And by the other pile, you think, oh, dear Lord, not again. Mm. And you know, because it's your signature, it says something, so you need to read it. But it stays on the desk for at least a week before I start reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes this mountain to climb because it's not necessarily fun reading either. It's just, it's really boring and dry reading.
Yeah, and then they call you because you say, oh, the zip code was listed wrong or they made a mistake somewhere. It's like you call them and then you get this automatic messages like we are not open between, and then you look at your clock and think, oh shit, it's 6:30. Oh, okay, tomorrow is another day, and no, that's for me. That was really, really demotivating. I like to work with the technology, but all the shebang that comes on the side. Oh dear Lord.
Yeah, and that's part of the startup. It's I mean, it's a lot of fun to do, but there's always the flip side on it as well, right? Like the actual fun part of the startup is obviously developing the stuff and getting it out there, but then you have the flip side, which is the paperwork. But it's just part of it.
Yeah.
It's I also don't like the paperwork all too much, and I wish I could just pay someone to do it, but we don't have that funding right now. So now it's you do it yourself in the beginning. We already touched upon it a little bit, but what excites you the most about the future of Peyeoneer?
I'm really looking forward to the first patient we can treat. And it's still a coin toss whether it will go good or not good, because the animals are not the patients. I have a strong feeling, and I believe in the product we made. So I'm really looking forward to speaking this first patient. Like, how is it going? How are you feeling? And was it as bad as you feel? And then maybe in a year later or a couple of years later, still having contact with this first patient, knowing what's going on with his or her disease. That's something that excites me.
And how long would it take to know whether it works with these clinical trials?
Yeah, glaucoma is a disease that never sleeps. So the idea is to first do a half a year follow-up, then extend it to a year, then 1 year becomes 2 years, 2 years becomes 5 years, 5 years, 10 years. That's how all those large glaucoma trials are set up. So I hope in the coming 10, 15 years that we can also have this big studies in which the patients, we can follow up for a long time.
And how long would it take to get the medical registration for it, that you could actually start implementing? Is that also the 10 years or?
No. The medical registration, and as being founder from a startup, you always tend to make a very optimistic proposition, and that's nice to get money in. But realistic is that it will take from now on a year.
Okay.
because you need to have your quality management system in order. We need to have production in order and everything checked off. And then we need the external tests to be performed. So we do not do the safety and biocompatibility tests for this ourselves. We ask a company to do that, just to prevent the bias.
Yes.
So we need to sterilize the product, package the product. All of that taken together with 3 FTE.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon some more. Will take at least a year.
Yeah.
And then we can go to the first patient.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting in the future, because a year, it's not... I would call a year near future, because it's not that long. In the startup world, a year is not very long, so...
No, the realistic view would be 5 years, and in 5 years I want to have sales.
Yeah.
I want to be on the market. I want to have sales in the US.
Yeah. I think that could be, if you work hard for it, that is not unrealistic to say 5 years for that.
No.
Especially at the point you are now already.
Yeah.
Okay. As a closing tradition on the podcast, we ask our guests to bring an object with them that has a significant meaning for them in their personal or career life. What did you bring with us or with you for us today?
Yeah, I brought a coin with me. And this coin is attached still to a paper, which I got on August 26, 2014. And I'll show it to you. It's a coin minted by the VOC, the Dutch Indian company.
Yes.
I got it from my dad. And this coin has the, in Latin, luctor et imago. So wrestle and come above. And I got it from my dad, who bought it somewhere on a market. And I always kept this coin. And when I went on my endeavors abroad, I took it with me. And also for Peyeoneer, I found a letter when I was moving to my new house. And I thought, like, yes, what he wrote there is still correct for me. It's still going there. You have to wrestle, you will have to pivot, you have to take this old Dutch VOC mentality in a startup to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And my dad saw that in 2014 already in me. I didn't know myself by then, but now looking back, I think the story he wrote and the meaning behind it, it's still following me, and I think I should not lose that.
Very nice. Yeah, it's a deep meaning behind it, and very personal as well.
I don't think he meant it that way, so I'm quite... I think if he looks back at this podcast, he's like, oh, shit, he still has that thing. But yeah.
It had a lot deeper meaning for you than... Christian, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah.
And welcome. Sharing your story about glaucoma and your life works pretty much. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the First Moves podcast. If you have a moment to leave a review, it not only helps us improve the podcast for you, but also allows us to invite even better and more inspiring guests in the future. Thank you and have a nice day.